Welcome back to another Heavy Metallurgy review. I am Melanie Loves Death Metal, and today I'm going to be talking about the brand new album from the Black Dahlia Murder, Servitude. This is their 10th full-length album on Metal Blade Records, and most notably known as their first album without their frontman Trevor Strnad. As everybody knows, if you're familiar with me and you've been following me for the last several years here on YouTube and over on Instagram, the Black Dahlia Murder is one of my all-time favorite bands. Trevor and I had a very brief online friendship after he noticed my YouTube channel about 6 months after I started it and found me on Instagram, probably after I tagged him and the band in some sort of a post. And I will never forget the day that I got the notification that showed he was following me on Instagram. As somebody who has been such a huge fan of this band for so long, since it's essentially their inception, so it's been a long time, this was probably one of the most coolest moments that I've ever had in my social media career, I guess you could say, as Melanie Loves Death Metal. Trevor was most notably known as an incredible ambassador of underground death metal as a whole, or just metal as a whole, but underground death metal is what him and I nerded out about. And him following me was really, really cool. It was really hard not to fangirl over that moment, but I did try to keep my interactions with him relatively brief and not as frequent because I did not want to be that annoying fan that consistently bothered him. But the several interactions that I did have with him over the course of those several years were always a lot of fun. And it was always nerding out about brand new bands, underground bands that had just released demos and EPs. A lot of it was brutal death metal, and he is who I credit for really, really diving into the brand new brutal death metal scene. He was incredible when it came to being that metal ambassador. Unfortunately, on May of 2022, he took his own life, and that was very, very shocking for myself and obviously a lot of people within the scene who are diehard fans of this band. He touched a lot of people's lives in this whole scene of, as we saw it call, blast fiends, as the Black Dahlia Murder fans call themselves. Very tight-knit group of fans, very dedicated. We really just love this band. And so it was devastating to hear, and it felt weird to be so upset about it because I didn't know him personally, obviously, and it just was still sad. And it's still sad, and it's always been kind of a shock when you think about it. And it took a while for me to go back and listen to their albums after that happened, because it just felt weird. But since then, the band has decided to carry on, and they did something that I was happy that they did. I was glad they didn't end their career there. A lot of bands in the history of metal music, or just music as a whole, tend to move on without a different vocalist. And sometimes if they pass away, they do call it quits and they end the band. Other times they move on with a different vocalist and they still find success. I know this is not everybody's favorite band, but AC/DC is probably the most prime example of that. When Bon Scott passed away, they moved on with Brian Johnson and still found success in that. And they had relatively same style of vocals, and so it worked. This is a similar situation in that Brian from the band, who is also a member that has been there from the very beginning, has written music with Trevor, has really just formed this band into what it is, has come off of guitars and has taken over the top spot as the vocalist. And that made the most sense for me, and other fans who are close to the band understand who Brian is. And at that time, it was like, okay, we're doing this, we're moving on. There was no question that the band was going to do Trevor justice here. They weren't going to go outside of this crazy realm of different music, and they were going to honor him and pay homage to him with this album. That is simply what they have done with this album. I will be 100% honest, it was very strange at first when the first single, Aftermath, came out, to hear Brian's vocals, to hear that it was the Black Dahlia Murder, like that sound, that core sound was still there. That's their foundation was still there. everything sounded exactly like them from all their past albums, but then it was Brian's vocals. And at moments it felt very strange because it felt like Trevor was there. It felt like it was Trevor's vocals for a brief second, and then you realize it's Brian's. And that was a very, very strange adjustment for me when that single came out. And I will admit, after I got this promo, it took me a little while to listen to it. I didn't know if I wanted to. It was a lot of mixed feelings that were going back and forth, not because I was angry. It was just my own personal uncomfortableness of this. It was just a strange feeling, and I've never really done that with a band before. But I finally told myself, stop being a baby, listen to the album, support the men, as we call them. Support these guys. This is one of your favorite bands. You're going to love it. And that's exactly what happened. This album is a safe album, I will admit. And that is what a lot of people are saying, but that's not a bad thing whatsoever. They wrote an album that is the Black Dahlia Murder. It is what you are used to hearing, and there's a lot of sound in here that pays homage to a lot of their older albums. I hear a lot of Unhallowed on here. I hear a lot of Nocturnal. I hear a lot of Miasma. A lot of that older sound of the Black Dahlia Murder that made me fall in love with them. The songwriting was most notably the big thing that everybody had questions about. Trevor was known for his just unique style of vocals and his lyrics and the storytelling that he did within those lyrics. And I know that Brian helped out amongst the years of writing those lyrics. But it was a big question in the back of my mind was, is that storytelling still going to be there? And that's exactly what they continued on with this album. They didn't have any songs that were a straight up dedication to Trevor. I mean, maybe possibly in the back of their minds as these songs were being created, they wrote something because they knew that that's what he would have done. And that was the way that they were going to honor him. But there's no straight up track that just dedicates their music to Trevor, as a lot of bands tend to do. And I love that they did that. I love that they paid a subtle homage to him. This album is, Trevor is there. He's there. He was there with them when they wrote this album, and you can tell that. Like I said, it's the Black Dahlia Murder. But the thing that's the different adjustment here is that Brian's vocals are similar, yes, eerily similar to Trevor's, but also not Trevor's vocals. The one thing that I absolutely love about this album that happened with this band is that Ryan Knight is now back in the band. He exited several years ago. I believe it was after Abysmal. And the 1-2 punch of him and Brandon Ellis on guitars are awesome. The guitar leads, the rhythm guitar on this are so good. Max Lavelle is still on bass, and he sounds absolutely amazing on this album. And then you have Alan Cassidy, who's been in the band for a while. It's just simply phenomenal. I mean, the band is still tight. They're still writing great music. They still sound incredible. The production is fantastic. There's a lot of old school Black Dahlia Murder sound on here. I mean, you hear with the first track, Evening Ephemeral. I can never say that word. I mean, that opening track is fantastic. It's killer. It sounds like the Black Dahlia Murder. The riffs and just the overall beat of the song, and just it's fantastic. Another notable song that I absolutely love on this album is their single Aftermath. It's a very Black Dahlia Murder song, and like I said, it just felt like that was Trevor with that song, and just the way the lyrics come off and the vocal style. It's, Brian does a really, really fantastic job on this album here. And yes, it's not the same as Trevor. They do have different styles of vocals, but also highly similar at some points. And that's just something, again, that I've had to really, really try and block out there. I told myself, Trevor's got such a unique vocal style. It's not going to be the same. And Brian proved me really wrong on this. Like I said, they have very similar styles. His style is a little bit more, I would say, not as variant as Trevor's would be, but still strong. and aggressive and in your face, which is what the Black Dahlia Murder is. This album is simply fantastic. It's 10 tracks long, 32 minutes, so it's not anything super long there. There's nothing on here that has really strayed off from the path of the sound of this band or what they've done in the past. It's not anything groundbreaking. It's not anything that they've never done. So if you're expecting to listen to this album to hear something completely different, now that they're essentially somewhat of a different band, but not really, that's not what's happening here. And I think that was the best move that they could have done. It was a safe move, but it was also a respectable move. And for this band to carry on now, I think the creative barrier that this band may have felt like they were having with this album may now be able to break open a little bit more, and they may be able to, while still honor and carry on Trevor's legacy, be able to create a little bit more of difference in their songwriting and you know, move into a little bit of a different way forward. I'm not too sure if that's what their plans are, but I feel like it would, for me personally as a fan, it would be totally okay if that were to happen. Verminous was their last album, and I felt like that album, to me, felt like a very mature album that the band wrote. That they were really honed in, they were locked in with where they wanted to go, while still keeping that older school Black Dahlia Murder lore that everybody loves. But the maturity was definitely there now. I mean, the band has been around for a very long time. They started off in the early 2000s, 2001. I mean, think about that. How many years ago? It was over 20 years ago. And they were young when they started off. Unhallowed is a very raw and terribly produced album, but has always carried on a legacy within the Black Dahlia Murder that just has made them have a core foundation of who they are, the style of band that they were going to be, which is just fun and goofy. They didn't treat themselves too seriously. However, within their music, they did. And they're just such a phenomenal band to be a fan of. Servitude is an incredible album. Is it their best album? I don't think so. Is it an album that I'm going to listen to over and over and over again like I have with Ritual and Nocturnal and Miasma and Everblack and even the newer ones, Nightbringers and Abysmal. And most notably, my favorite Black Dahlia Murder album is Deflorate. I know I'm in a small little group there. We all have this discussion. But I do think I will listen to it. I do think as this band continues to move on, whether how long that is, I'm not sure. It'll be something similar to how I am with AC/DC, where I love the Bon Scott era, but now that, you know, the Brian Johnson era has had so many albums out and it's been circulated so much in the music space that I really love a lot of those albums as well. I do think that that's going to carry on with this band, and I have no doubt about that in my mind. I did not want to go into a full in-depth track-by-track analysis for this review because this review is probably the most personal review I will ever do on this channel, and I wanted to really talk, you know, open and honestly about my feelings about when it was first announced, when it was first released, and just have everybody understand there's a lot of bias here. And it's not a perfect album by any means. I don't think that they really, like I said, reinvented the wheel. It's really nothing new from what we've heard from Black Dahlia Murder, but given the circumstances around the album and what had happened prior to this album, I think that was the best thing to do, because it felt like it was paying homage and at least dedicating that to Trevor and almost being like a closure for the band and the fan base. And here now, it's out. it's done. We're not moving on without him, but I think this will now allow that creative gate to open a little bit more, and the band can maybe form not a completely different way or path here, but what they did with this album was exactly what they should have done, and I'm happy about it. And I think it's going to be fun to see what happens here. It's going to be great to see it live on this tour. It's almost like a victory. You know, they prevailed over tragedy, and a lot of bands have a hard time doing that. And I'm happy for them, and I just want the band to continuously having great success, and it's a great album. So if you're new to the Black Dahlia Murder, it's a great album. I think you'll enjoy it. I think you'll love it. If you have never heard any of their past discography, please go back and check it out. But this is definitely a very welcoming album. I don't think that there's anything on this that would make anybody say anything negative if they've heard past Black Dahlia Murder albums. And I think it's a fantastic album. So one thing that I do want to note, my fandom has definitely been probably more diehard with this band than I have with any other band. And I do want to say that yes, I am the one that created the Black Dahlia Murder subreddit over on Reddit many years ago before Ever Black came out. So shout out to everybody over there who has been carrying on that torch and keeping it going, because I have not been as involved with it as lately as I should. And I know that you all were anxiously awaiting for this review. So I wanted to shout out all of you guys, and I hope everybody enjoys this album. That's all I have for you guys today. I will see you in my next review.